In the 1930s, two scientists synthesized a compound that could change the future of human health and performance forever. Enhance muscle growth, more energy, focus and drive, improved sexual health and fertility. Those chemists, they went on to win a Nobel Prize just a few years later. Sounds too good to be true. But it is. In fact, this compound was so good, so powerful, and so effective, it had to be banned from athletic competition because of the incredibly unfair advantage granted to its users. Now, of course, you've guessed it. I'm talking about testosterone, a chemical compound with incredible, in many ways, magical benefits that can be synthesized in a lab, for sure, but also, importantly, in your own body. Is there a single lever that can be pulled from the perspective of health, fitness, and quality of life that delivers quite like testosterone? I don't think so. And if that's the case, then optimizing your body's ability to create and utilize testosterone naturally should be at the top of your list. And not just for guys going to the gym, but it turns out for women as well. Which is why the noticeable, shocking decline in testosterone levels in men in the United States is so alarming. It's why testosterone replacement therapy has become a nearly $3 billion industry, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. Many experts tell us that this decline is inevitable, that it's part of aging, or the cost of modern sedentary lifestyles. But what if this trend could be reversed, both on an individual level as well as on a societal level? And what if it could be done the way that nature, or as evolution intended, without the use of pharmaceuticals, with the powerhouse that is the human body? And at 41 years old, with my testosterone recently measured at 950, which is 200 points higher than it was 10 years ago, I'm here to say, well, of course, it can be. With that, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Unconditional with Norbie Schickel. Today, we're talking T, okay? The big T, testosterone. And wait, if you're a lady, and I know that there are many women who listen to this show, and you're thinking, testosterone, the male hormone for chest hair and a bigger Adam's apple, pass and pass, hang on, okay? Hang on. This episode is important not only for the boys and men in your life, but also for your optimal health span and lifespan. Most of us probably understand testosterone as the, quote, male sex hormone, responsible for the sex drive, aggression, and muscle building in males. And of course, body hair and a deep voice and all that. But did you know that women actually have more testosterone than they do estrogen? And I'm not talking about roided up bodybuilder gym girls either here. Okay, I'm talking about normal, natural, healthy women. Did you know that? I'll confess, I didn't know that until recently. Which leads us to the obvious question. Why would that be? Well, because in short, testosterone, it's incredible. It's awesome. And it is responsible for much, much more than sex drive, muscle mass, and aggression. I really like the way that Dr. Andrew Huberman describes testosterone, in which he says that testosterone is the hormone that makes striving feel good. Okay, just think about that for a second. It's the thing that makes working hard, physically and mentally, feel like exciting, right? Feel like a rush, something that you look forward to rather than avoid. That's testosterone doing it. Importantly, in both males and in females. Testosterone is highly connected with the dopamine and reward centers of your brain, and it's a key aspect of motivation and drive, sex drive, of course, but more than that, of drive and passion for life in general. Now, isn't that fascinating? Because when I first started getting into health and fitness in high school some 25 years ago, the only people talking about testosterone would have been bodybuilders, okay? Maybe high school biology teachers in a way of explaining why teenage boys could be super annoying. But the good news is that a lot of this has changed and is changing. When I first went to get my testosterone check something like 10 years ago, I think I was maybe 29 or 30 at the time, the doctor looked at me like I was completely insane. Okay, I think the first thing he said was, like, you're fine. What are you talking about? You got muscles, no ED, right? You got nothing to worry about. And I think I said something to the effect of, wanting to establish a baseline as I age, which was true. I was also just very curious. And you could just see like the wheels in his head kind of turning, like he wasn't quite sure. Like, is there something nefarious going on? Was I trying to score anabolic steroids somehow? Like he just couldn't wrap his head around why somebody in their 20s or 30s who seems to not have a problem would be interested in knowing this fundamental metric, especially as they got older. But the good news is a lot of that is changing. The conversation around testosterone has become normalized, and that's a good thing. Because the effects of low testosterone, well, they're not great, to put it mildly. Let's just hit on a few of the big ones. And as I'm going through these, it might be worth asking yourself whether any of these feel familiar. If any of these sound like you, or if maybe somebody that you know in your life. And of course, if they are, all good, okay? No judgment. There are many reasons why our hormones, including testosterone, have collapsed as a species, ranging from lifestyle factors to environmental pollution. But recognizing the problem is the first step in fixing it. So in the absence of a test, or maybe even with a test, what are some typical issues that one might experience with low testosterone? Let's talk physical and body-related issues first. Low energy and fatigue, okay? Not just the occasional getting tired, but persistent, right? The feeling of being flat, right? Reduced muscle mass and strength. Increased body fat, especially abdominal fat, okay? This happens a lot in men. Decreased bone density, hint, hint, ladies, okay? Higher risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis and fractures as we age. These are just the physical ones, okay? Do any of these sound good? Does any of this sound like it's making your life better, easier, enabling you to become more like your best self? Well, the answer is fairly obvious. There is a reason why taking testosterone is the performance-enhancing drug. Okay, look at any Mr. Olympia, and the effects of super physiological levels of testosterone are on full display. It's not difficult to imagine that incredibly low levels, right, the inverse of this, may have just as profound an effect, just in a less obvious way. Let's talk about sexual and reproductive issues, something many of us are probably somewhat familiar with respect to testosterone. Low libido, right? Low sex drive, one of the most common complaints, particularly in men with low testosterone. Erectile dysfunction, especially including reduced morning erections. Okay, we're going to talk about that, right? Morning wood being this sort of canary in the coal mine for what your testosterone levels look like. All right, it's funny, but it's incredibly important. Reduced sexual satisfaction, and of course, decreased sperm production and infertility. None of this is good. Okay, especially the first few, I think all of us can relate to that are maybe past a certain age. Low sex drive, ED, reduced sexual satisfaction. It's just a hard pass, right? We don't want any of that. Now, if you're young, or if you're not interested in kids, maybe the infertility doesn't sound like such a big deal. But I'll just say this. Minds change all of the time. And I'm talking to the young guys and girls here, but infertility, it can be a massive strain on a relationship, okay? Massive strain on a marriage. I say this as an absolute 1,000% certainty that your priorities as a single guy or a single girl in your teens and 20s are going to be very different than a happily married man or woman in your 30s or 40s. Okay, it's just a fact. And for the vast majority of people, a huge difference is going to be on your feelings towards having kids. Whether you choose to have kids or not, and for the record, I am on the pro-kid bandwagon. Okay, I wasn't when I was in my teens and in my 20s, but as I said, things change, and I'm a shining example of that. But it is far better to have that as a choice that you get to make, whether to have children or not, as opposed to a limitation that is imposed on you that your partner and you have to live with. Okay, I just don't see any argument there. Far better to have the option. Okay, so we've talked some impacts to physical performance, to impacts to sexual health. No surprise there. But let's talk about something that many of us may not be aware of or may be less aware of. and that's the impact of testosterone on mental health. Low testosterone is strongly associated with depression, with low moods, right? With feeling flat. It's associated with irritability, brain fog, and even trouble concentrating. We've talked about the importance of testosterone in the role of drive and motivation. No surprise, low testosterone is strongly associated with reduced motivation and reduced confidence. Not to mention sleep disturbances, including an overall degradation in sleep quality. Okay, this is just to name a few. Just to give you an idea about what some of the impacts of low testosterone has on your life, right? It's far, far more than just making your chest hairy and your voice deep, okay? Giving you big shoulders or something. It's far more than that. Big implications for many aspects of your life. Now, maybe some of those resonated, maybe they hit home, maybe not. But you may be wondering, how big of an impact is this? And do we have any numbers that can help quantify the scale of this issue? And maybe, if your T levels are less than optimal, am I alone? So let's review the findings of one of the most compelling analyses on this. According to a 2020 analysis, using national health data from the United States, focused on adolescent and young adult males, this study found that mean total cholesterol in adolescent and young adult men aged 15 to 39 declined by 25% between the years of 1999 to 2000 and 2015 to 2016, going from 605 to 451. Right? So that's a 25% decline over the span of 15 years. And importantly, the researchers controlled for contributing factors such as obesity and increased BMI. In other words, within 15 years, total testosterone in what should have been the healthiest, the strongest, the most virile segment of the U.S. male population had fallen by 25%. I've said this before on this channel. I'll say it again, but something is off. And I want you to consider the time frame we're talking about here. We're not talking about a wildly different time from a lifestyle perspective, right? We're not comparing men working in shipyards or hunter-gatherers to sedentary office workers. We're talking about two populations in which their physical activity, their jobs, their family life is all pretty similar. And we're talking about a time period that was 10 years ago, right? That study ended in 2016. What would those numbers look like today? Now, I haven't seen any specific numbers on it, but of course we all know the answer, right? They'd look a whole lot worse. Now, of course, you could go down a rabbit hole on questions related to this uncomfortable trend. What caused this incredible decline? Why are we only having this conversation now? What are the impacts to women and to girls? Where are our health authorities on this? All valid questions, and some we're going to touch on in this episode, but many are going to be beyond the scope of our conversation today. But as I've said, the good news is that many people are waking up to this. They know that something is off, right? They have the low energy. They feel like they should be more optimized in the gym, better focused, all that, and they're taking steps to correct it. This has led many men, and I can safely assume that many more will be led to the use of testosterone replacement therapy, or TRT. And in light of the numbers that we just discussed, some of the common ideas around testosterone, right? Testosterone levels decline 1% per year on average after the age of 30. Or has anyone heard that? I know I certainly have. Along with increased awareness and availability of TRT as a treatment for some men, this has been a complete game changer. No denying that, right? Better energy, weight loss, or reverse an erectile dysfunction in some cases. These are profound effects. And while TRT may be the right answer in some cases, we'll go more in depth on TRT at some point in a future episode, okay? I can promise you of that. We're going to keep the conversation today focused on natural testosterone optimization. How to increase your T levels naturally without the use of injections, without the use of pharmaceuticals. Now, why would you want to do that? Why not just take the shot? And for some people, this is a sucker's bet, right? Testosterone is testosterone. Why does it matter whether your body makes it or it comes in the form of an injection in the butt? And again, we'll go in depth on this in the future, but here are a couple of things that you may or may not know about TRT, about testosterone replacement therapy. First, in many cases, it will shut down your body's own production of testosterone, meaning that you will likely be dependent on pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life, regardless of price, regardless of availability, regardless of legality. You will be dependent on drug companies, on global supply chains, and on governments for arguably the most important hormone that your body needs. Now, maybe this is okay, maybe not, but really let that sink in for a minute. And this calculus, of course, is very different for somebody who's in their 60s as opposed to somebody who's in their 20s. Second, while natural testosterone, the kind your body makes, improves fertility, exogenous, injectable, or oral testosterone, it kills your fertility. And as we are in the middle of witnessing a troubling rise of guys in their 20s and 30s, even teenagers, getting on TRT, this is not great. How many of them are aware? Well, yeah, your doctor is supposed to tell you, and of course, the good ones will. But what of all the, quote, men's health clinics that are popping up all over the place, who may be less than diligent? And that's to say nothing about the illegal sourcing and use that many teenagers are falling into. And while I get that we've been told that injectable and oral testosterone is chemically the same as the stuff that your body makes, let's just say that I've been around long enough to have some reservations about that claim. Okay, when infant formula first hit the market, mothers were told that it was better than breast milk, right? Because of science or something, right? Well, how has that claim aged? Not knocking formula. Okay, I'm very grateful to live in a world with formula as an option, but let's not kid ourselves, right? There are many examples of this. It is very, very rare that something that is made synthetically is as good or better than the natural version. And for the record, while the chemical composition of TRT may be the same as the compound that your body makes, well, there's more in these injections than simply testosterone. How much does that matter? I don't know, to be honest, but it's certainly not crazy to ask the question. According to estimates that I've seen, TRT is something like a $2 to $3 billion a year industry in the United States, and it is growing. That's not nothing. So we should be very cautious around the claims made by companies that have a big incentive at play here. And that's not to say anything about the unknown unknowns, right? What are the implications of a lifetime shutdown of natural T production, even with an artificial injection as a substitution for young people for maybe decades? I don't think we really know. And that should give us pause. So it comes as no surprise that I am squarely in the camp of aiming to optimize your testosterone naturally first. Diet and lifestyle change. Maybe some selective supplements first before ever considering exogenous testosterone. I get the temptation. It's easy, it's all over social media, and in some cases, it's going to be warranted. But is that the only or even primary approach across all age groups? I think that's insanity. I think that's a mistake. Now we're going to talk about what are the big levers here, okay, at least from my perspective, that can be pulled to help optimize your testosterone. Some of these are going to be fairly obvious, things that you've probably heard or just intuitively know. But we're also going to discuss some things that are not quite so obvious and actually maybe even more important. Now, we're going to revisit this theme a lot on this channel, but there's this idea that it's all downhill after a certain point. Like you hit the high water mark of health and fitness in your 20s, maybe in your 30s, and then it's just decades of decline after that, right? Getting fat, of losing muscle, of chronic illness, and just a lower quality of life. But the more that I look into it, and the more I see people doing incredible things, both physically and mentally, in their 40s, their 50s, even 60s and older, I'm wondering how much of this is truly inevitable. versus something that we've merely accepted because it's common. We've all heard that testosterone declines 1% per year in men after the age of 30, something like that. And maybe, right, maybe this is common, but maybe it's not normal. Maybe it's not inevitable. As I said, in my last blood results, my total testosterone was 950 at the age of 41. And for reference, that's more than double the 451 of men ages 15 to 39 that we discussed in 2016. It's almost off the reference range according to some tests. It's high, okay? Now, does this make me twice the man, some kind of genetic freak? Maybe I had T levels of 1600 when I was 25, and I've been on the same slow decline ever since, right? Just starting at a higher point? Well, no, right? My testosterone has increased by 200 points in the last 10 years. Increased. Now, I know there are a lot of caveats that could be thrown in here about testosterone variability, about total versus free, about symptomatic low T versus measured low T, and we can get into that at a future episode, okay? But for now, let's keep in mind 2 points. First, all the data, at least that I've seen, that supports the claim that T levels are dropping in men over time references total T, okay? Total testosterone. And of course, total testosterone is what your body is willing and able to produce. Full stop. Okay. So that's where we're going to focus for now. And of course, like, subscribe, join me on the channel, right? Come back. We're going to get to discuss all that good stuff in a future episode. Okay. So now, armed with that famously long preamble, even by my standards, let's get into it. How to raise your testosterone naturally without the use of injections, without the use of TRT. And the meta point here, at the place that we need to start, it's just how I think about it, is, are you giving your body more reason and more ability to produce more T, or are you giving your body a reason to produce less? Are you constraining your body's ability to produce testosterone? Okay, that's the way I think about it at a macro level. And again, we're going to talk primarily about my experiences here. One, because it's my show and I get to say what I want. But the other obvious reason is, again, for me, so much of this comes down to priming. You hear these authoritative statements, testosterone declines 1%. And the obvious question, like, is that truly the case? And if that is the case, is it the case all the time? Or are there outliers? To be honest, I don't know whether I'm an outlier. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But it's important, especially if you're like me and you have this as a goal, to be healthy, to be fit, to be optimal for as long as you possibly can, to get the most out of life, to truly maximize your potential. This is an important aspect of it. And priming, right? Hearing the stories of other people who have done it, who can do it, well, maybe that inspires you too, right? Maybe that starts as the exception that breaks the rule. But if it's something that I can do, it's something that another person can do. Okay, so let's start with the obvious stuff. 1, eat whole foods, the cleanest that you can get. Now, I'm not talking about any specific diet here. I'm not talking about vegan, carnivore. As I've said before, not looking to take sides in the diet wars. What I'm talking about here is finding a pattern of eating that works for you, that involves as low as possible, little to none, ultra-processed foods. A pattern of eating that is high in whole, nutrient-dense foods, okay? And walking. I'll add walking in there, okay? True magic. We've talked about this in a previous episode, but that is the cheat code to sustain fat loss naturally. Okay, no GLP-1s, no retatrutide, nothing crazy. Eating whole foods and walking. Okay, it's worked in Japan, it's worked for me, it's worked for millions of people, and it will work for you too if fat loss is a goal. Also, check out that previous episode if that's something that is of interest. If that is of interest to you. But the point here is, you want to fuel the body as it was intended. Okay, use the body as it was intended, and you will be happy with the results. You probably know that ultra-processed foods tend to be high in calories, but low in nutrients. Okay, but honestly, I think that's only part of the issue with these foods. I think a much, much bigger issue is the pesticides, the food additives, and the toxic seed oils. Many of these compounds, as we discussed in our episode on seed oils, have the effect of taxing your mitochondria, right, which directly connects to your metabolism, but also of crushing your hormones. Okay? Really, really not good. We don't want that. Okay? We want to make it easy, or at least easier, for your body to do what it's designed to do what it does best. Now, do we have to be perfect 1000% of the time or we'll wind up hypogonadal? No. Okay, of course not. But these things add up, right? Each little offense makes it more difficult. So we want to be very mindful about what the big picture is. So eat as clean as you possibly can in terms of minimal pesticides, ideally no pesticides, right? Eat organic, eat whole foods, and I'll just add my little plug in there for walking. Whole foods and walking, organic if possible, as often as you can. Speaking of being mindful, mind your water, okay? Filtered and remineralized or natural spring water. Now, I acknowledge there's no perfect answer here. Filtered municipal water versus typically spring water in plastic bottles. I'm not sure that there's a clear winner. We've done the reverse osmosis before. We're on spring water now, and I'm happy with it. But you don't have to put on a tinfoil hat in order to understand that there are many, many chemicals, some that have been added intentionally and some not, that are endocrine disruptors that jack up your hormones that are in the water, right? Pesticides like atrazine, which one report, I'll point out, found in something like 90% of municipal water supplies. BPA, which is also an estrogen mimicker, and PFAS, right, what we refer to as forever chemicals, all have the effect of jacking up your hormones, all have been found in municipal water supplies. So minding your water can be an incredibly important aspect of optimizing your hormones and optimizing your testosterone. No, I'm not a huge macros guy, but don't fear fat. Okay, fat and cholesterol are the building blocks for testosterone. So even if your aim is to get lean, simply eating a ton of lean protein, right, tuna, chicken breasts, protein powder, isn't necessarily the path to high testosterone either. Okay, whole eggs, high in cholesterol. A food I'm starting to like more and more, shrimp, wild-caught shrimp, also high in cholesterol. Which, in case you didn't get the memo, and many of us haven't, eating cholesterol does not raise blood cholesterol. This is one of the many cases in the health and nutrition space where the same word is used to mean two different things and causes confusion forever, okay? But I am right on this, all right? Eating cholesterol does not raise your blood cholesterol. If that is something that you're concerned about, eating saturated fats does raise your blood cholesterol. Confusing, but I assure you this is true, or at least true from what I understand, okay? And from what I understand, it's not controversial. There is a lot of controversy about what this means, about whether high blood cholesterol is a good or a bad thing. But the mechanism, from what I understand, it's not controversial. But choosing to eat foods that have some fat, choosing to eat foods that have some cholesterol, good thing from the perspective of your testosterone. Okay, now, how much protein, how much fat, how many carbs? To be honest, I don't keep track. I've never kept track. And I know for many, this is going to be like a giant hiss, boo. I don't, maybe at some point in time in the future, but not right for me. For some people, my approach probably sounds like liberation. For others, it probably sounds like a cope. It probably sounds like I'm tanking my gains. But I'll give you my opinion on this. I'll give you my perspective. And I have seen it play out in my own life. That as long as I'm eating a large percentage of my food as whole foods, as high as possible, whole organic foods. I should add organic too. And I do try to eat somewhat balanced, but I haven't really found that it matters much. My body composition stays pretty similar. My testosterone stays pretty similar. And this idea of whole foods, I mean, I could point to many sources, but I did 2 episodes on the work of Dr. Weston A. Price. And for those who are unfamiliar with Dr. Weston A. Price, he was a Cleveland-based dentist who traveled the world in the 1930s. And simply put, what he and his wife, who also were Christian missionaries, I should point out, what they attempted to do was examine the idea that dental cavities and this degradation in the overall oral and even physical health of human beings was the result of race mixing. Okay, that's hugely important. And it's something that almost never gets said with respect to the conversation on Weston A. Price. Everybody knows him for fermented foods and bone broth and grass-fed butter. And spoiler, go check out those episodes, okay? Not all those things he actually talked about if you read his book. But that's what many of us know about are those things. But what Dr. Price and his work really centered on was examining this idea of race mixing and this sort of degradation in human health, including oral health, as compared to his thesis, his hypothesis on it, was that it had more to do with nutritional deficiencies and nutritional gaps, right? A decline in our food, not necessarily a decline in the genetic stock of humans. Okay, that's hugely important. I'm very, very inspired by his work. It's one of the reasons why two of my first episodes, and they are early episodes, right? So grade on a curve here. But that's why I did 2 episodes on his work, because his work is that profound. And of course, I should add that one of the things that makes his book so compelling is that it comes at a time when we have this incredible technology in the personal camera and in commercial airline travel. So he and his wife are able to travel around to these various places of the world, and they're able to find people with as close to the same genetic stock as possible, but those who are following their traditional, what he refers to as a primitive diet, and those who are following a modern processed diet of the 1930s. And no surprise, what he finds is those that are following these whole foods, nutrient-dense, primitive diets that have sustained their civilization for hundreds of thousands of years are super robust. They've got great health. They've got great teeth. They're tall. They're muscular. I mean, some of the pictures, especially in the back, are just incredible of, some of these people. I mean, some of them are just complete specimens, even by our standards today. And those following the modern processed diet, well, it's the complete opposite, right? They're mouth breathers, all kinds of teeth problems, terrible cavities, in some cases, many bone deformities, right? And keep in mind, this is modern of the 1930s. So I think only a handful of vitamins had even been discovered at this point in time. So the modern processed diet of the 1930s would have been incredibly nutrient poor, even by today's standards, right? But the point is that based on Dr. Weston A. Price's work, based on people studying the Hadza and the Catawbans, many of these hunter-gatherer and tribal populations that still largely live and eat the way that they've done for thousands of years, one thing that you see is there is an incredible variety in macro composition. But the common theme is that they are eating whole foods, they tend to walk a lot, and they are eating foods that are free of additives, of pesticides, right? Very low to no ultra-processed foods. So to me, that is the common theme. That is one of the things that really orients my thinking. Now, once we're within the realm of whole foods, organic, are there reasonable debates about increasing levels of performance with different macro level compositions? Perhaps. Are we there at a society yet? Not even close. Right. So to me, it's just the more people that get on the whole foods, organic, the walking bandwagon, the better. Health outcomes are going to continue to increase and improve. And if there are those that still have the energy left over to have the debate about macros or vegan versus carnivore, God bless them. More power to them. That said, I would still strongly recommend getting your blood work done in order to identify any nutrient deficiencies, okay, especially on the micronutrient and the mineral side, all right? Something that we can go into it at a later date, but there are many reasons why many of us may be more micronutrient and mineral deficient than we otherwise would be. There are some incredibly important micronutrients and minerals from the perspective of testosterone that you should be aware of, including zinc, vitamin D, magnesium, iron, and cholesterol. Okay. My preference is for food sources, of course, but if that's not possible, or if you're still less than optimal, then I'd consider supplements, which leads me to my next one, supplements, which I do take. Okay. Not for the express purpose of, say, boosting testosterone, but to cover any nutrient gaps that I become aware of. Food is my preference, but again, there's no perfect answer here. I've got no affiliation with these companies. I'm not recommending any, but this is just what I do. And of course, this is all subject to change. So the supplements that I take pretty much on a daily basis, so I fluctuate a little bit. I take a pure encapsulations supplement called Athletic Nutrients, just like a super multivitamin. I take a desiccated fish egg supplement. I am primarily plant-based, but I do take a beef organ supplement, again, influenced by the work of Dr. Weston A. Price. I take magnesium glycinate, okay, one of those top ones for testosterone, but it's also good for many other functions in the body. I think it's Carolyn Dean, drawing a blank on the name. She wrote a book called The Magnesium Miracle, incredibly powerful book, opened my eyes to the importance of magnesium. And magnesium glycinate is one of those forms that has no laxative effect, right? So if you're taking certain forms of magnesium and you take a lot of it might affect your bowels. And then based on my more recent blood work, and I'm going to just have to get into this in a later episode, I added 2 new ones, and that is an omega-3 supplement and an iron supplement. Okay, we're going to talk about iron and ferritin levels and a whole bunch of other things that I found very interesting at a later episode. But for now, I'll just throw those out there. Those are the ones that I take. That's it. No creatine, no protein powder. Occasionally in the past, I've taken ashwagandha when I had some cortisol levels that came back a little higher than I expected. Not this set of blood work, but 2 sets ago. But to be honest, I haven't really noticed a difference. Okay. I've never taken Tonkat Ali, another one that's discussed a lot from the perspective of testosterone, but I'll look into it. Okay. I try to keep an open mind, especially if it's something that is natural, especially if it's something that's derived from food. And if I ever do, I will keep you posted. Okay. Especially if I see some results. All right. So that covers a lot of food. That covers a lot of supplements. That covers some water. Another big one, fairly obvious, train, work out, and get lean. Okay. There is a very, very strong association between increased BMI and lower testosterone. And this is one of those things that can become a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle if you let it, where your choice in movement can help you get lean, which in turn can help you raise your T and thus improve and enable additional physical performance, which can then unlock additional levels of testosterone, right? It can become this virtuous cycle. Now, my own personal bias here is towards high intensity interval training, right? HIIT training. I've done the bro splits in the past. It's been probably 10 years since I've been in like a true weight room. I'm not knocking it, definitely. If that's what works for you, obviously keep going, give it a shot. But this is just what's worked for me. And if you want to know where I would start specifically or how I approach the subject, I've done an entire episode on how to get lean, how to get ripped and aesthetic, right? This is the part 2, right? Whole foods and walking, kind of the base of the pyramid is the way I think about it. And if you want to start getting into the body recomposition, building a lean, ripped, and aesthetic physique, this is where I would start. And what I included in this episode is what I've personally discovered to be the best ROI movements and patterns that have worked for me so far. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely do so if that's of interest. Okay, the last one is sleep. And I will fully admit that I have been less than optimal in the past. Okay, but I am trying to get this dialed in. We'll do an entire episode on sleep in the future. This is something that I'm continuing to educate myself about. But for now, I'll just say that my primary objective is to add maybe 30 minutes to an hour of quality sleep throughout the night. Okay, for now. I know I sound like a toddler here, all right, but it's all good. I've been on the, sleep when you're dead train for a long time, and I'm trying to slowly get off that train. Not perfect, certainly not perfect, but I'm going for 7 hours of quality sleep per night, and I'm going to see what happens. Will this unlock even higher levels of testosterone in the future? Maybe. We'll find out, and I'll keep you posted either way. Okay, so those are the more obvious ones with hopefully some added detail, some added perspective, and a reminder on probably some stuff that you already know. But hey, nothing wrong with a little nudge every now and again. And we're going to get to the less obvious stuff in just a second. But just consider this list first, okay? Just humor me. And let's weigh them against what I said from the very beginning. Are you giving your body more reason and ability to produce more testosterone or less testosterone? And then let's consider this against the standard American diet and lifestyle and ask ourselves the same, right? I mean, forget all the conspiracy stuff, forget the chemicals in the water. Is it any wonder that testosterone is going the way of the dodo bird? No surprise at all. So let's move on to the less obvious stuff. Okay, the stuff that may be silently sabotaging your efforts to bring your testosterone to its proper, elevated, and glorious new height. Pornography. Yep, it's a big one. Now, this may be on the obvious list for many people at this point, and if so, that is a great thing. Because I will tell you that when I was in high school and college, that was certainly not the case. I even recall taking a college psych class in which the professor claimed that not only was the use of pornography, quote, healthy for men in particular, female professor, okay, just to be clear, but that it actually raised your testosterone levels. And I think if memory serves, this was based on a study, okay, but what they had the students do, because they always use college students in these psych experiments, was they had them watch like a couple scenes of pornography, and then they measured their testosterone right after. Well, yeah, okay, no surprise there, all right? Not to get graphic, but a sexually mature man gets the visual cue anticipating sex, and then you measure his testosterone. Yeah, in that minute, it's definitely going to go up. But obviously, that's not really the right way to think about it. We'd want to know what the effects are over time, like not minutes after seeing an explicit video, but months and years after habitual use. And shout out to Tim Ferriss on this, because he was really the first guy that I heard talking openly about this, about the benefits from cutting out pornography and masturbation from your life. And yeah, it's a topic that probably not a lot of people are chomping at the bit to talk about. But since then, millions of men have tried it, have cut pornography, sometimes with a lot of difficulty, I might add, and they've seen the same things, right? Stop watching porn and instead watch your testosterone, your sex drive, motivation, and performance in the gym all improve. And when you think about it, this makes complete sense. Again, testosterone is the hormone that makes striving feel good. What is something that most men are willing to strive for? Right? The procreative act. If it's doled out instantly, effortlessly, for free, with the click of a button or the swipe of a finger, again, is it any wonder that T levels have dropped as pornography use has climbed? Are we giving the body more reason, more ability to produce testosterone needed to achieve our objectives? Well, frequent pornography use, especially among young people, is the false signal that we're living in a world of too much sex. So essentially, yeah, it's a pretty strong reason not to create additional T. Alcohol. Okay, and again, I hate to sound like the fun police here, but alcohol is a hormone disruptor, okay? And that includes testosterone. In addition, alcohol can disrupt sleep patterns, which is definitely going to add insult to injury when it comes to testosterone. Now, I've done an entire episode on cutting out alcohol recently, so if that's of interest, definitely check that out. But if this is new to you, even low to moderate levels of drinking, the kind of drinking that, again, many of us were told was actually healthy for us, was actually good for us, right? The 1 to 2 glasses of wine per night, the hormetic effect, right? All that. Well, it turns out not so much. Okay. Alcohol is a poison. It serves no biological function. any reduction is a good thing. Okay, that's just sort of the punchline. That's the bottom line on this. Check out my previous episode. And of course, Dr. Andrew Huberman. I am very indebted to this guy. Really opened my eyes to the dangers of alcohol. I am essentially 2 years sober at this point. And again, I was squarely in the low to moderate, honestly, maybe 2, 3 drinks a week kind of a thing, on the weekends. I was by no means a heavy drinker, but on a personal level, I do believe that this one change, right, removing alcohol as a chronic habit, going from a chronic drinker, even at small levels, to a non-drinker, I do believe that this is what recently has moved my T levels from the 700s and the 800s into the 900s. Okay. Now, by what mechanism? I'm assuming it has to do with cortisol here, because cortisol acts like a suppressor of testosterone. And between this blood test and my last one, I do see a noticeable decrease in cortisol. At the same time, my total testosterone increased. Now, if you're thinking, but wait, I thought alcohol mellows you out, takes the edge off all that. Shouldn't it reduce a stress hormone like cortisol? Go back and listen to that episode on alcohol for sure. But in short, in the immediate, yes, alcohol will bring your stress level down. But over the long period of time, right, habitual use here, in other words, not after the drink, but after the chronic pattern of alcohol consumption, it will reset your ability to deal with stress down. Okay. It will ratchet it down. Okay. That's the mechanism. So that the same stressor that would have been a little bit stressful becomes increasingly so with time. And in my case, I think this had a profound impact. I wasn't a heavy drinker, definitely in the low to moderate camp, but cutting out alcohol from where I'm sitting has paid huge dividends for my testosterone. Sunlight. Okay. Vitamin D is one of the big ones. So no surprise that sunlight is important. Ideally on your chest and back, right? Not just on your face, your arms, and your eyes, which doesn't do much for your vitamin D levels. And I'm not talking about going out and getting burnt to a crisp, right? In some cases, just 10, 20 minutes a day, if you can, depending on your skin tone, you will feel the difference. I know that I certainly do. If you have darker skin like me, well, you need a little bit more. So keep that in mind. Now, how will you know if it's working? How do you know if your testosterone is moving in the right direction? And if all of these lifestyle and dietary changes are even worth it? And the good news is that if you're a man, you have an inbuilt precision instrument that will tell you with unbelievable clarity and accuracy, yep, I'm talking about that one, whether your testosterone is moving in the right direction. Okay, morning wood, you're all good. Or, I don't know, something to that effect. Maybe a bumper sticker? I don't know, probably not. But kidding aside, yeah, this is one hugely important and good indicator of testosterone. It's much, much more than a vanity metric. In addition to muscle mass, gym recovery, energy, and sex drive, okay, this is the canary in the coal mine from where I'm sitting, okay, a leading indicator as to whether you're moving in the right direction or not. While on the subject, let's introduce another one, okay, one that I don't hear almost anybody talking about, but I think is profound, and that is birth control, okay? We're getting a little bit personal here, but it's the truth, so I'm going to share. If it helps you, amazing. If not, unsubscribe, hit the unlike button. I don't know what you would do. But when my wife and I were first married, for a while, she was on, fairly standard hormonal birth control. Okay. Millions of women are on it. I'm certainly not judging here. Okay. I get it. This is pretty ubiquitous. But when she went off of birth control, okay, first from the perspective of just trying to live as naturally and holistically as possible, but also thinking in the future about kids. Well, I'll just say it was noticeable, okay? And it makes complete sense, right? Going back to this notion of increased reason and ability to make more testosterone. And of course, a woman ovulating naturally, interested in having kids with you, that's a pretty darn good reason. Now, am I saying that you need to go and pressure the lady in your life to drop birth control so that you can make gains in the gym? No. Well, I don't know, probably not. But what I am saying is that this is another obvious reason testosterone levels could be on the decline, right? How ubiquitous is birth control in our society? And why, when these signals, right, these pheromones are restored, so to speak, well, they can impact male hormones as well. Okay, so those are the big ones for me. Is increasing your natural testosterone production possible even after the age of 40? Yeah, I believe so. Okay, I'm living proof of it. Are there some obvious things that can be done in order to do so? Absolutely. And we've discussed many of them today. Are there some less obvious? Hey, maybe even cranky ones. All right. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this one puts me in the, puts me in the crunchier and the kooky category, the last one, but all good either way. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. I really do believe that. I am a firm believer in the idea that we should not just simply go quietly into the night, right? That we shouldn't simply accept this narrative that decline is inevitable, that this is the beginning of the end, that it's all downhill from here. Okay. I just vehemently reject that, vehemently opposed. Okay. And if that is you, hopefully this conversation has been valuable. If there are other things that you think I may have missed, shoot me a note, give me a comment, something that works for you. I'd love to hear it. Okay. Especially from the perspective of things that are natural, food-based, lifestyle-based, non-pharmaceutical. Okay. I'd love to hear it. And of course, if you are enjoying these conversations, I would always appreciate a like, a share, a subscribe. This podcast is fairly new. It's exciting and encouraging to see the new downloads, the likes, the subscribes, all that stuff. But we are still very, very much a baby podcast. I've had a couple people reach out about becoming a guest on the show. Exciting. I love it. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not exactly set up for guests at the moment. At some point in time in the future, though, I would love it. So keep the notes coming. I will definitely keep your name on a list. And at some point in time, who knows? We'll have video, we'll have guests, we'll have the full deal. Okay, but for now, that's going to be it for me today. Again, thank you as always. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I certainly did. And I will see you next time.